MLB tiebreakers used to be fairly straightforward for all their existence. If two teams were tied for a playoff spot, they would play an extra added game to the regular season. Winner clinches the playoff spot, loser goes home. Fans have often called this tiebreaker game Game 163, naturally because there are 162 games in a regular season, and this tiebreaker game is part of the regular season. It's not a special one-off game. All stats and events in that tiebreaker game would count towards regular season statistics. There were a handful of instances in the past where, instead of a single tiebreaker game, it would be a best of 3, but those only occurred a handful of times some 60 plus years ago and followed the same rules and regulations as a single tiebreaker game. Fun fact, the former best of 3 tiebreaker game series is the reason why Dodgers legend Maury Wills has the distinction of playing in 165 games in a single season. The typical 162, and the 3 additional tiebreaker ones. To this day, an MLB record for most games played in a season. The tiebreaker game, for better or for worse, has been done away with since 2022, and tie-breaking procedures follow a set of guidelines similar to that of the NFL. This was done to prevent bizarre and crazy scenarios that could arise due to the addition of a third wildcard team in each league. That begs an interesting question though. What was the craziest tiebreaker scenario in MLB history? In retrospect, there's never been a crazy tiebreaker scenario in MLB history. All of the tiebreaker games involved 2 teams tied for the division or wild card, and they played a typical game 163 to determine the winner. There was never an instance of, for example, 3 teams ending the season tied for the final playoff spot. It's always been 2. As fun as that may be to have 3 teams tied, we'll never get to see what could have happened. However, there was one year where that almost happened. In fact, there was a season where, entering the final game of the season, there was a possibility 4 teams would all wind up with the same record with multiple playoff spots available. Such a situation has been described as baseball's worst October scheduling nightmare. Our story begins on September 30th, 2007, the final day of the regular season. With just 1 game left to play for all 30 teams, the standings were quite a mess in the National League. In 2007, there was only 1 wild card, so there were 3 division winners and the 4th playoff spot being the wild card. Of those 4 playoff spots, only 1 had been determined, the National League Central. For all intents and purposes, the National League Central is irrelevant for this video. With just 1 game left to play, the National League East had a tie for first place between the Philadelphia Phillies and New York Mets. Both had a record of 88 and 73. Although they weren't playing each other, that scenario seems rather simple. Should one team win and the other lose, the winner will clinch the East while the loser is eliminated. Should they both win or both lose, then they play a game 163 to determine the NL East winner, right? Yes, but there's more than meets the eye. In the National League West, the Arizona Diamondbacks stood in first place by a single game over the San Diego Padres, while the Colorado Rockies were 1 game behind San Diego in the standings. While the Rockies were eliminated from the division, they were still alive for the wild card with an 88 and 73 record, identical to the Mets and Phillies. What was the team currently holding the wild card spot, you might ask? That would be the Padres, with a record of 89 and 72. You might see where this is going. Those 4 teams, Padres, Rockies, Phillies, and Mets, could all theoretically end the season with the same record as none of them were facing each other. New York was set to host the Marlins, Philadelphia the Nationals, Colorado was playing the Diamondbacks, and San Diego facing the Brewers. Should the Mets, Phillies, and Rockies win and the Padres lose, all 4 will finish the season with an 89 and 73 record with the National League East and wildcard playoff spot up for grabs. Reminder that the final game is taking place on Sunday, September 30th, while Game 1 of the National League Division Series is scheduled for Wednesday, October 3rd, which would be the NL East winner versus the wildcard winner. There was the potential for several baseball games between these 4 teams to occur, and they all had to be played within a few days. Realistically, we might not know the full National League Division Series matchup until roughly 24 hours before it's set to begin. Let's say this occurs, and all 4 teams finish the season with the same record. What happens then? It gets really messy really quickly, so I'll try to put it as simply as possible by reading the official MLB rulebook. MLB Rule 34C2 subsection A paragraph AA states, if 2 clubs are tied for a division championship and both clubs are tied with 2 clubs from outside their division for 1 wildcard designation, then the season shall be extended to include 3 additional games as follows. The day after the conclusion of the season, the clubs tied for a division championship shall play a game to determine the division champion, and the clubs from outside their division that are tied for the wildcard designation shall play a game, the winner of which will play the loser of the division championship game in the winner's home city to determine the wildcard designation on the following day. So, the Mets and Phillies will play each other to determine the NL East winner, while the Rockies and Padres will play each other to start the wildcard winner designation. Winner of the Mets-Phillies game will host Game 1 and 2 of the National League Division Series. Winner of the Padres-Rockies game will then host the loser of the Mets-Phillies game, and the winner of that game will determine the wildcard. To recap, on October 1st, the Mets and Phillies play and the Rockies and Padres will play. Winner of the Mets-Phillies game stays home while the loser flies out west to face the winner of the Padres-Rockies game. That game will occur on October 2nd, and the winner will determine who clinches the wild card. That team will then fly east to face the Phillies in Game 1 in Philadelphia the following day on October 3rd. Everyone got that? It's a travel nightmare for someone. Hypothetically speaking, the following events could happen. The Mets play at home and win on September 30th, and following that game, would immediately travel to Philadelphia to face the Phillies on October 1st. The Phillies held the season series over the Mets, which is why they would host a tiebreaker and not the Mets. New York loses that game, then they need to fly 2 or 3 time zones over to either San Diego or Colorado. Worst case, they need to fly to San Diego. They face the Padres on October 2nd, win that game, then immediately fly back east to Philadelphia to face the Phillies in Game 1 of the National League Division Series on October 3rd. In 4 days, they go from New York to Philadelphia to either San Diego or Denver, then back to Philadelphia. You can guarantee the Mets in that situation would have a fit with the commissioner about all those games across the country. It would put them at a huge disadvantage for the playoffs. Anyway, this playoff scenario would absolutely be the craziest tie-breaking procedure not only in baseball history, but possibly sports history. 4 games in 4 cities covering up to 4 time zones. Of course, for all this to happen, the Padres must lose the final game of the regular season while the Rockies, Phillies, and Mets win. So, what happened? The Padres blew a 3-0 lead over the Brewers and lost convincingly 11-6, one of the 4 criteria met. The Rockies were tied 1-1 entering the bottom of the 8th and rallied for 3 runs against Arizona to eventually win 4-3. 2 of the 4 games checked. The Phillies sent out 44-year-old Jamie Moyer with their season on the line, and he pitched 5 1/3 brilliant baseball to lead Philadelphia to a 6-1 victory. 3 of the 4 completed. All that needs to happen for this pandemonium playoff scenario to occur is for the Mets to beat the last place Marlins. New York was 11-6 against Florida in 2007 entering this game, and needed just 1 more win to trigger the craziest playoff scenario in sports history.
It's a 2-run double for Ugla. The Marlins have put up 7 runs in the top of the 1st inning.
We were unfortunately denied that. Since the Mets lost, the Phillies took the NL East, and the Padres and Rockies played a conventional Game 163 on October 1st to determine the wild card. Oh, what could have been had the Mets simply won a game against the last place team with nothing to play for. It's the craziest tiebreaker scenario that never happened.